This episode is brought to you by HP Plus. In a world full of smart devices, isn't it about time your printer got smart too? Now printing is smart with HP Plus, and the HP Smart app is how it all happens. You can print from your phone with just a tap, no matter where you are, even from your garage/home office/yoga studio. Huh, that is smart. HP Plus. Learn more about smart printing at hp.com/smart.
This episode is brought to you by Progressive. Have you tried the Name Your Price tool yet? It works just the way it sounds. You tell Progressive how much you want to pay for car insurance, and they'll show you coverage options that fit your budget. It's easy to start a quote and find a rate that works for you. It's just one of the many ways you can save with Progressive. Get your quote today at Progressive.com and see why 4 out of 5 new auto customers recommend Progressive. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Price and coverage match limited by state law.
Stony Island Audio.
Well, folks, this is it. I'm Open Mike Eagle, and this is What It Happened Was, Season 2, and this happens to be the finale. This is the last one, my last conversation with LP, charting the course of his career up until this day. Oh, man, it sucks. The last ones suck for me for doing them. They're probably pretty okay for the audience, for the listeners. You get to put a bow on things. You get closure. I don't get closure. These things live in my heart forever. I want to give a few shouts out on the way into and out of the last one. And in this one, we will be covering When the Jewels 4, and I'm also going to ask a variety of other questions covering stuff like High Water, covering stuff like Little Johnny from the Hospital, the last Company Flow album, stuff that it wasn't so easy to build a full episode around. I probably could have talked about RTJ4 for a while, but since it's the last episode, I want to make sure I got some more stuff in. So we asked some more questions, and you know, we just let L get some more shit off. You know what I'm saying? Let him get some more shit off. But some shouts out. A big fat shout out to Jake Bowman. Jake Bowman has been the engineer for this season, and he's done an amazing job. And this podcast, the assembling of the audio, takes a lot of time and energy. There's rounds and rounds of edits that take place between the original recording of me and Elle's conversation and the final version that you hear, and all of the music drops you hear in the transitions with the ads and everything. That's Jake. Shout out to Jake. Jake is on Twitter, and get at Jake for your audio engineering needs if you're local to Southern California. He's also a dope producer as well. Wanted to give a shout out to L for fucking making himself physically, psychologically, emotionally available enough to sit here and dredge up all of this stuff from his past, when I know that's not easy to do. And I want to thank him for being involved and active in the promotion of it as well. It's been a big help, and you know, this season has been very successful in no small part to his efforts. So I definitely want to make sure I shout that out. And one more thing I wanted to do is I wanted to give a quick moment, a rest in peace for Jason Smith. Jason Smith was my partner in Stony Island Audio. He worked at Starburns Audio. He was the CEO of Starburns Audio. And he saw what I was doing and invited me to Starburns to start my own network. And days before the season started, just days before the season started this season, he passed away suddenly, leaving behind a wife and a child. And it has been so weird, you know, keeping this pushing without him, because he was so involved in the processes of this network, and especially this show. He put a lot of effort, a lot of his brain energy, a lot of resources into this show. So I just wanted to make some space to say that I've been wanting to say something all season. It didn't feel like the right time, because the stuff that we're doing with Elle is celebrating him, and I didn't want to take away from any of that, but I did want to give a shout, in this case, a shout to the Beyond from somebody who really is a large part of this, a large part of the reason why this podcast exists. So we're going to get into it. We're going to talk to Elle about Run the Jewels 4. We're going to talk about High Water. We're going to talk about Little Johnny from the Hospital. This is part of the Stony Island Audio Network, which is a home for all sorts of podcasts in the hip-hop space. Super Duty Tough Work. Fatherhood's Pod. Can't Knock the Shuffle, which just had its season finale with Dante Ross. Dad Bod, Rap Pod, Self Quar. A new show called Creativity and Captivity. And another new show, The Raw Report with Dice Raw, which just premiered last week. So get at that. Dice Raw from the legendary Roots crew. Before we get to the episode, though, I want to give a quick shout out to our sponsor, ExpressVPN. Sometimes I like to watch old movies from my childhood to help me feel my feelings. I have problems with that. So sometimes I like to find something I used to enjoy in my childhood and sit and watch it, and it'll help me cry. In this case, I wanted to watch the animated G.I. Joe movie from 1987, and Netflix don't have it, and Hulu don't have it, and Amazon don't have it. I couldn't even buy it nowhere to stream it on my television, and I was upset. And I put that on Twitter, and somebody in my comments was like, have you ever heard of ExpressVPN? And they was trying to be funny, but they was right. Okay, they was right. And I had the answer under my nose the whole time, because ExpressVPN is what I was able to use to watch the movie I needed to watch to feel my feelings, okay? And this is why you should use ExpressVPN and not other VPNs. ExpressVPN doesn't log your activity online. Lots of cheaper free VPNs make money by selling your data to advertisers, but ExpressVPN doesn't do this. They even developed a technology trusted server that makes their VPN servers incapable of storing any data at all. Speed. ExpressVPN now uses Lightway, a new VPN protocol they engineered to make user speeds faster than ever. I've tried a couple of VPNs in the past, and sometimes they can slow my shit down, okay? But ExpressVPN is always blazing fast and lets me stream my movies for my feelings in HD quality with no buffering. Okay, and it's easy to use. No technical skills needed. Just fire up the app, tap one button, and you are connected. Your grandmama can use it. Your child can use it if they know how to push a button, okay? And it's not just me saying this. CNET, The Verge, and many other tech journals rate ExpressVPN the #1 VPN in the world. So protect yourself with the VPN that I use and trust. Use my link, expressvpn.com/what today, and get an extra 3 months free on a 1-year package. That's expressvpn.com/what. Visit expressvpn.com/what to learn more. And here we are, y'all. It's the finale. It's me and LP. One last go round. This is what it happened was. Oh, yeah. Deluxe labor, the underground undertaker. The whole cape is independent as fuck flavor. Audio exhibit, visit the history. To him winning without fucking with the industry. And him losing without fucking with the industry. No illusion, we tracing every movement in the symphony. This is official from lifting of pencils. Cold flow the depth jugs up to the fist and the pistol. I'm sending questions like infinite missiles. Digging for details when stories from the past come up. And if he don't remember, then he has to shrug. It's what the podcast does. What had happened was. Oh man, so here we are. This is it, dude.
I know, man.
This is the last one. It's almost sentimental.
It is. If I didn't hate myself talking so much, it would be sentimental. Like I'll miss you. I won't miss me.
Yeah, I mean, further conversations we have cannot be for the world to hear, which will be probably a little easier. than this.
Damn, we waited a while too to do this one, huh?
Yeah, I think it's funny.
Was that my bad?
Nah, I think it was just both of us and me trying to keep the machine running, and because I don't think we've done one since we started putting them out.
No.
Yeah.
No. This will be the first one that's mildly current. Where,
right.
You know, every other one there's like a little hint of it's not the
past.
Yeah.
Yeah, I almost did some shit today where I put out a question of like, oh, doing the last one today, see if you guys want to ask anything, but then I started thinking about, no, I don't want that. I don't want them kind of problems.
Yeah, you'll definitely get a bevy of questions for sure.
Yeah. And there's a couple that we're going to work in today. We're going to cover Run the Jewels 4, and then we're going to get into some questions that people have been bugging me about, and try to wrap up like that. But we can kick it off. Run the Jewels 4, which, I mean, wow, it just turned a year old.
Yeah, it did.
So George Floyd is murdered May 26th, 2020. This album drops June 3rd.
Mm-hmm.
And I know it's been said by you and many people who've asked you about how prescient it seemed for some of the subject matter that's on the album. But what I'm really more curious about is just for you all as a group and you as a creator, what did it feel like to release a project into a fully chaotic and on fire and broken world?
I mean, there's so many levels to that answer that I might give. The first level is that one of the contributing factors of us saying, fuck it, we'll risk this record falling flat during a time when there can't be any real promotion was George Floyd's murder. And also everyone's murder. It wasn't,
right.
It was what was happening in America in general. It was one of the reasons why we decided, like, let's put this shit out now. It's bigger than what we might lose from a badly timed campaign. There's two versions of timing. There's timing of humanity and history and emotion and intent, and then there's timing of business and strategy and campaign and money and all that bullshit. That factored in, weighed in to us deciding, that we wanted to drop it first. So we knew that we had a record on our hands that surprisingly all of a sudden was so goddamn on the nose in terms of the way that we were feeling and in terms of what was going on. We already knew it was because that's the history of the world. But where everybody's consciousness was at that moment, again, we felt like somehow we had a record that would do something for people at that time, at that moment. It made it that much more important for us to drop it. And it was that in a combination of just wanting the fans to have a record. Already all of our plans were destroyed by COVID in terms of the releasing of the records. Internally, that was like a thing that hit us kind of in March. We were supposed to drop the record April.
I see.
Yeah. That we were going to drop it the day that we were playing the main stage before Rage at Coachella. And we were going to drop it on that day. A gutsy move. One that we were one that we were all, pretty psyched about. And then it became clear to us, we were in LA, and it became clear to us that this shit was maybe not just the regular flu, whatever. And we had already shot the Ooh La La video. I had been in LA training. Me and Zach were going to the trainer every day for 2 months. I quit smoking. I was like, it's about to be on. Yeah, I was making real life changes to get ready to go on the road. We were going to jump this tour off right after Coachella. For Run the Jewels 4, we ended up going with BMG, who is technically an independent label at this point because they're now independently owned. They're not in a major label system, but they have the power, the force of a major label.
The infrastructure of it one.
Yeah. We were just like, all right, well, point being, we had to kind of treat it a little bit more like, okay, there's a traditional rollout, which is something that previous to that, we never really had to think about that at all. We were like, we're just going to jump street date, drop the shit, whenever we want. Yeah. Run the Jewels 1, we dropped it. No one was expecting it. Run the Jewels 2, we were literally on tour. I think we were drunk when we decided to drop it.
Always one of the best decisions.
Yeah, we were like, let's do it. Let's drop it. Fuck it. Much to the chagrin of our extended team. Run the Jewels 3, we jumped street date again and dropped it on Christmas Eve. So we never had any type of consideration for too much of a plan. But when you fuck with somebody who's got, 2,000 employees and they're giving you a big marketing budget and you got, seemingly have resources that are going to be bigger than what you had before, you can't really just operate like a rogue cell completely. You know, you got to have a rollout and you got to have a plan and et cetera, all that bullshit that everybody has to do when there's legitimate, motherfuckers, pensions or,
Right.
So we were proceeding that way. We were proceeding like that's what was happening. And we were like, oh, well, this is going to be different. This is a change. We've got to like set a date and stick to it and, roll it out precisely. And everybody,
singles, announcements,
everything,
that whole
singles
routine.
into shows, into things, and the blah, blah, blah. And just kind of get the ball rolling in a way ahead of time that we knew what was going to happen from our end. And of course, then destiny and life just sweeps in and it's like, actually, don't worry about it, guys. yeah. All those plans are fucked on a level that you couldn't even imagine. Like, oh, you're jumping street date, we're jumping tour date 2 years into the future.
Wow, yeah.
It was suggested to us that we wait until the next year. It was suggested to us because a lot of artists did that. A lot of artists were, big artists were confronted with the reality, which is internally in the industry. Everyone was starting to murmur and kind of know that it was unlikely that shows were happening that year, not even just that summer.
And I think, just for people who don't really understand, that is leaving a lot of money on the table.
Yeah.
Right? Like people may not really understand how big of a deal that is to release something when you can't tour it versus when you could.
Exactly. So that's exactly what a lot of big artists in the industry did. They just canceled their plans. Like, yo, I can't risk it. We're going to have to push this back to next year when we know, or when we suspect it'll be different. No one knew, of course. We still don't know. And we were looking at releasing a record and not being able to tour it. And for us as a touring group, we fought really hard to get to a point where we're a big touring entity. And, just as people, it's like, it's my job. You do the record and then you go to work. You punch the clock and you work for however long they'll let you, essentially.
Exactly.
It's like, hey, can I tour this shit for 6 months? Can I tour for a year? Can I go to every territory? Or am I just relegated to a couple runs? The touring was really the bread and butter for us. It was always sort of the thought. It was why we had the leeway to drop the record and not worry too much about counting pennies, giving the record away for free, all that. Most people balk at that because that's like, oh shit, that's where I make my pennies. That's important. We had gotten to the point where we were all about making the record and playing the record. And those are the two purest things that I think that you can really be involved in. But here we were making a big ass plan, and then the big ass plan got completely derailed anyway, which in a funny way kind of put us back in our comfort zone. Like, hey,
the most planned turns into the most chaotic yet.
Like chaos is the Run the Jewels comfort zone to some degree, because it allows us to just decide on the spot what feels right, as opposed to what we have to do. And I'd say me and Mike are both the type of cats who we really tried to make it so that our lives are about what we want to do versus what we have to do. I don't think we're unique in that regard, but that's really what our goal has been. But for some reason, both Mike and I felt like, I think because of the times, because of what was happening, because of our sort of even responsibility to the fans, like, look, we knew that people were ready for it. We knew that, in fact, they had been very patient with us about it. And when we were step two about possibly releasing it and just, postponing it until things were safer, until we had a more guaranteed income, until this operation could really move, we just said that didn't feel right to us. Our gut was like, you know what? This shit needs to be dropped now. I think that we thought it was important for multiple reasons. And we didn't know what was going to be the result. We didn't know if that was going to fuck us. We didn't know if in a year we were going to be like, yo, I need this fucking money.
Right.
That's a big deal for me. This is what we do. And then it came to us that we could drop it earlier. We jumped on it. We said yes. We just figured, fuck it. We'll go the opposite direction. We'll just jump out here, because some things are more important than our marketing strategy.
Right.
And we weren't really that type of band anyway. Anything that we had or any momentum that we have, I honestly believe was just because of the first 3 records. It wasn't because we weren't running advertisements and people, it's not a fucking movie trailer,
Right.
It's just some real typical Run the Jewels shit, which I'm happy about. Like, yeah,
that's
fuck
dope.
it.
Yeah, I look forward to seeing the Run the Jewels movie. It's going to be called Fuck It, the Run the Jewels story.
Yeah,
I'm really looking forward to that.
Fuck it, a love story.
What do the hands mean this time? We've been charting the development of the album covers through the Run the Jewels, and this time the hands are gold again. They're taking on a little bit of an abstract shape.
Sort of gold. Yeah, there's some gold in there, but mostly black with reflections of gold and Well, in our continuing quest to sort of move and gain momentum in a direction, I started thinking about how we kind of were getting a little further away from the cartoonishness of what Run the Jewels was. Run the Jewels 3, we took it into a third dimension, and we stripped away the chain, which needed to be stripped away for multiple reasons. A, we had found a bigger meaning in just the hands themselves, and B, it's really annoying trying to come up with like a cool chain, every time. Like, what should we do? A Cuban link? It's just,
Yeah, you run out of options
and
quick.
Run out of options quick. But as this thing is taking its change and making its metamorphosis into something else, it's also becoming less important that it's defined in a certain, in any cartoony way. Now, the third ones were based on the Nick Gazin drawing. We made 3-dimensional statues of that. The fourth one, it just felt like it was closer to getting rid of all of that dressing, and sort of getting it closer to an elemental thing, like something you might find buried in the future. And when I spoke to Sasenti, I was like, I'm looking for something that will suggest very clearly the Run the Jewels pistol and fist, but is way less defined. And we started playing around with different concepts for that. And I just was like, man, I couldn't help but want to see some low polygon shit, because the era that I came up in being a kid, for us, the future looked like low polygon shapes.
Right.
That was Tron.
Yeah.
That was
the first 3D video games. They were all...
First 3D video games. There was the classic Star Wars video game. I don't know if you remember that. That was all... But low polygon shapes in some way represented the future. And yet at the same time, we've gone so far beyond that in design aesthetic or whatever. And how do you do that without it feeling like a retro, thing? But at the end of the day, it was really just the idea of turning this not into two hands, but more closer to a symbol, closer to, an archetype. Like it's
like the platonic ideal of what Run the Jewels is.
Sure, or this, and also the essence of, the essence of the hands, without it being the same riff on the same sort of goblin-y, thing. We wanted it to almost be something you could project onto, and that's actually something that we're doing with the hands. Every album we've had big ass hands that we hang. That's kind of our one expense for touring, besides lights and shit. We keep it really simple. We always based our touring idea on Run DMC, which was Run DMC was doing stadiums with 2 rappers and a DJ and making that shit thrilling. And they might have a big giant Run DMC, behind them. So we actually are projecting in light and things onto these because of the way it's shaped. But anyway, again, let me also tell you that for our last conversation, I decided I should probably get pretty stoned. So.
A celebration.
All right. If I'm being honest, there was no correlation between me getting stoned and us talking. I just realized just now that I am really high. But that was basically it, man. Just to kind of once again give it more room to breathe. I feel like now that we have this new symbol, it's closer to what it is, really. And it's a bit of a rebirth. It's a new template. It gives room. Remember we were talking about the last album, and you sort of brought up the idea that doing the transformation to the goal of hands almost felt like an ending. As opposed to, and like kind of, you were sort of seeming to question, like, where does it go from there? And you were right about that. I think it was the end of the first phase of what we were doing to a degree. And Run the Jewels 4 was in some ways a fresh and new reboot. We had just done this really intense emotional album that had these strains of sadness and melancholy to some degree that had been woven in it. That was a record that we call our blue record, and colors of these records often are reflective of the way we feel about the record. That's why we made it a blue color palette. So Run the Jewels 4 really did feel like it was a fresh blast of energy. And I always sort of imagine that this is like the alchemized version of that symbolism. And those are, by the way, also photographs. That's what a lot of people don't realize.
No, I had no idea. That's amazing.
We put a photograph of the actual hands, the models of the hands, somewhere in the artwork. I think it's in the artwork. But a lot of people don't realize that those are not drawings.
Right.
That those are actually photographs. And what Tim Sasenti did, who's just a genius, is that he shot because it's got all those different plates and those surfaces, those hard edges and those polygons, you can reflect light off of it and it can pick up things. So he shot those hands in the same position with multiple different lighting, colors of lighting.
I see.
And then he took them apart and comped them together.
Oh, okay.
So that's why it has this surreal, your eye gets tricked and
right,
it doesn't
because
think that it's a photograph.
In real, there's no way probably to get those real life reflections in one sitting. It had to be composite. Right.
It's impossible. So that was the whole thing. But yeah, a lot of people, I think, didn't realize that they were photographs, which is fine. A lot of people didn't realize that the third one.
Yeah.
And Tim Sasenti, who I've been working with since I was Sleeping You're Dead, has this really amazing, he's a really amazing photographer, but he's also a really amazing, digital artist.
Right.
He really works the two together seamlessly. He did the same thing in a similar way with I'll Sleep in Your Dead. A lot of people thought that was actually like a drawing or just computer art. I remember someone was trying to shit on it. They're like, oh, you used the Photoshop, flare light. And that wasn't the case. Mm-hmm. Obviously, the case was that we shot this mirror with real smoke and with real lights over it. But Tim is just a master at obscuring that, making your eye not really know the deal. What are we talking about?
Well, now we're going to talk about Ooh La La, because the goddamn song is so goddamn good. And when I listen to the drums on that song, it kind of takes me back to like top billing.
Looking for M's like I lost a friend. Jump out of my bed like where that bread. You go hold the egg. Waiter, bring the check. When we talk, we collision cars. Keep us in your thoughts. Fully dressed at the crack of dawn. Weapons heading off.
MCMI, people call me Milk. When I'm busting up a party, I feel no guilt.
Like that kind of thump. And then what that made me remember was that when you were, in the cold flow days, when you were making the Fire in Which You Burn, that was an interpretation along the lines of top billing for you. And as I'm listening to this album, I'm wondering if there's some intention to like kind of looking back to classic boom bap production. Like it almost like it sounds like inspired by Bomb Squad in a way.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think that to some degree, when I approached this record, I knew that I wanted it to be, first of all, I didn't want it to sound melancholic. I didn't want it to sound blue again. I didn't think that that's what the natural course of what we needed to do. That wouldn't be exciting for us as a sound, and it wouldn't be, you give a synth and keyboard player some weed and like unlimited hours in his own studio, and he'll come up with some epic shit.
Right.
And it'll sound like Blade Runner. You know what I mean? I made a concerted effort and decision to get back a little bit to some of the other techniques that I used to use. I definitely was like, I'm going to sample more on this record. I'm going to get back into that as a base for sound. I'm going to lean into some of my references in a really obvious way. I never wanted to be too clearly influenced by my era.
Right.
I mean, yes, it's there, it's clear, but I always wanted the music to be on its natural course of moving forward and being in the year that I'm in, or a couple of years ahead, even if you can pull it off. But I always looked at Run the Jewels as something that was not in any way stylistically, intentionally retro. I didn't want anyone to look at like the records that we're making. I'm still looking for the future. As a producer, I'm still trying to run into the future as much as I can, while using my influences as a base for my style and for my swing and for the way I think about music. But this one, it was like, I think that I let go of the fear that being referential was an issue, and I just leaned into it. Like, no, actually, I think because we haven't done this, because I've been protective of our sound. I never wanted it to be an old sound. It could never be an old sound. This time I was like, you know what? Weirdly enough, that thing that I've been avoiding is the interesting thing to do right now.
That's the thing to do.
Within the context of the arc of what we've been doing. And because Run the Jewels had to be, in some ways, for me, a synthesis of everything that I had learned about Run the Jewels that I thought was awesome. And taking those things and refining them and bringing it into the future. You know, a record like Ooh La La, I was like, let me start there. That was really one of the first records that I did for the album. It was that and Yankee and the Brave. And we recorded both of those in the same day.
Back at it like a crack addict, Mr. Black Magic, crack a bitch back, chiropractic, craftmatic, big daddy smoking big, Cali in a black, alley in a black, granddaddy rolling down, old natty how, napping Matty as a black, granddaddy off that.
Yeah, in a studio I had rented in Williamsburg that I ended up ditching after a while because I got in an argument with the landlord. So those two jams were recorded in Brooklyn, Mike, same day. Started with Yankee and the Brave and Ooh La La, straight up, the whole album. And Ooh La La was something that I did because I had always been scheming on sampling Greg Nice.
Yes.
Always. From Dwick. And
yes, absolutely.
I was like, yo, some days, it's one of those things as a producer, you have an idea and it's almost like you don't do it because you just assume that the second you do it, someone's going to drop it before you. Like it's such an obvious idea. So it's so clear to you because of your reference and because of how much that song meant to me when it came out and how dope Greg Nice is. Right. I just was shocked that no one had gone in and pulled that one. So we did it, found the acapella of Dwick and sampled Greg, and then we riffed on a warm, dope sound. And I think that was really one of the things that I was trying to bring to Run the Jewels 4. There was going to be like a fire and a warmth to the shit where I think Run the Jewels 3 was like, a fucking breezy winter day. You know, like in a lot of times.
So words from the firing squad. You know, speaking of
Dad, you're going straight. Arcs, you're going straight there. All right, respect.
I gotta go. It sounds like another ending.
This is for my sister Sarah, honey. I'm so sorry you were hurt. This is for the dawn. Mama took a knock, had to change her locks. Dusted up and brushed off, and I washed. Talk about a boss. For the holders of a shred of heart, even when you want to fall apart. When you surrounded by the thought, treaded water in an ice cold dark. When they got you feeling like a box, running from another pack of dogs. Put the pistol in the air, we are dead, swear to God.
Black child in America, the fact that I made this magic. Black and beautiful, the world broke my mama hard and she died an addict. God bless me to redeem her in my thoughts, words, and my actions. Satisfaction for the devil, goddammit, he'll never ever have it. This is for the do-gooders that the no-gooders use and then abuse. For the truth-tellers tied to the whipping post, left beat, battle bruised. For the ones whose body hung from a tree like a piece of strange fruit. Go hard, last word to the fire squad was fuck you too.
Is that how y'all meant it to sound?
What makes it sound like an ending to you?
Well, I mean, it sounds like, literal words before an execution.
Right.
It sounds like the end of a movie.
Right.
It sounds like your heroes are facing death.
Except that at the end we escape.
This is the story of a couple of small-time hustlers framed by crooked cops and forced to make a run for their lives. Nothing but a bag of money, a stolen Buick Grand National, and each other to their names. They ain't friends exactly. These guys have a better chance of killing each other than beating the odds. No, sir, they're brothers. And when the chips are down, I really don't think you want to bet against Yankee and the Brave.
That's the Yankee and the Brave. Yes, that song contains that moment, but it also contains the coda to that moment, which is that somehow the heroes got away and lived to fight another day. And then it loops back around into the episode. That was the concept of the jam. That was the whole trick of that jam. That was the point. Yes, me and Mike in front of a firing squad and getting some last words and what we might say in that scenario to some degree. Ultimately it's fuck you too. And at the end, you kind of don't know if these guys are dead or not. And then here come Yankee and the Brave and then we go into the episode. And it was designed, the whole album was designed as a loop. So when you finish at the end of Few Words to the Firing Squad, the intro to the show comes in. And the very beginning of the album, it's this week on Yankee and the Brave. So it's literally, you're supposed to be able to just play the thing in a loop.
So, you know, the albums are all numbered. This is number 4, but then you have this Yankee and the Brave concept, which feels almost like a subtitle for this one. It feels almost like if this album had a title other than Run the Jewels 4, it would be the Yankee and the Brave.
Yeah.
Tell me about where the concept came from and how y'all developed that Yankee and the Brave concept.
It was pretty stupid and easy. I mean, like it just came out of me. It just came out of something I wrote, at the end of. I told you the first jam that we did for the record was
Yankee and the Brave and Ooh La La.
Yankee and the Brave. At the end of the record, I go, Yankee and the Brave are here, blah, 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 whatever the fuck I say, right? But that's the first thing I say is Yankee and the Brave are back, or Yankee and the Brave are here. You know, it was just some cute shit to say. But started that, it wasn't Yankee and the Brave. It was like some other words that meant Brooklyn and Atlanta, essentially. And then we changed it to Yankee and the Brave, and we kicked it. And then I was like, you know, we just thought it was a funny name. We're like, oh man, Yankee and the Brave. That's such a throwback to like some of the old, you know, that's like a show we might have watched when we were kids, you know, like after Dukes of Hazzard, you know, like Yankee and the Brave. And then we both loved it. And me and Mike were from that era. Mike completely loved that idea. And then I got my dude to do the voiceover, sort of introduce it like a television show.
This week on Yankee and the Brave.
And that's just where it sort of started. I mean, it was that simple. It was the first thing we did. And then we kind of created this as a joke. I didn't even think I was necessarily going to use that outro. I didn't know if it was going to work. I didn't even tell Mike I was doing it. I was like, this is a really, really stupid thing here. You know, like I'm doing a really stupid thing. And I wasn't sure where it was going to be. It was too long to be the intro to the album. I knew that this time, you know, look, on Run the Jewels 3, there's one calculated risk that we took with the sequencing of that record that I didn't want to do again. And the sequence, usually when we Run the Jewels record comes on, for the first two, it was just straight kick in the door shit.
Yes, sir.
Just a face blast. On Run the Jewels 3, we put the song down first. Simply, again, because it was not what was expected. And we just are dicks about that. We like trying to kind of go a little bit against what's expected, you know?
Yeah.
So it set the tone, I think. It kind of got people ready that record was going to be not exactly just kick in the door and talk shit. It was going to be equally about who we were. This record, I wanted to start off like a shotgun blast. So I didn't really know where that skit was going to go. And when we did a few words for the Firing Squad, that's what cemented it for me. That's what made me know that would be perfect to use, because we wanted this record to give off a different feeling than the last record did. We wanted this record to give off something, I don't want to say hope, but maybe hope. We wanted you to walk away emotionally from this record feeling amped, and feeling and also having some joy. Not feeling amped like, oh, I just got my fucking soul rocked and now I'm amped because I learned something. You know, that's not how we wanted you to feel. We wanted you to feel like we wanted to keep those moments when they were important of depth, but ultimately we wanted you to walk away wanting to fight.
Yeah, you wanted the people to have energy to fight the fight.
And also feel some joy. And so for us, humor at that moment, this is the other thing. We were listening to a few words for the Firing Squad, and it was so heavy. It was so fucking heavy. And it was earned, I think, in that record. We really waited until the end to get that heavy. And that was what I proposed as well with this record. I wanted it to be fewer and more potent moments like that. And when they hit, I wanted them to really be felt because you had just gone through a ride. And it was time. It was time for you to hear that. But we were listening to this shit, and I was just like, yo, if we walk away from this record that the two heroes just died at the end of this shit, then congratulations, we just made a sad record. No matter what, no matter how much heat's on this shit, and there's heat on that record. To me, it's the most raw record that we've done, and the most refined. It's the combination of all of the things that I think we've done well, and it's done sparingly. I genuinely think it's the best record we've done. But we had that skit, and I just took the liberty of connecting the two and prayed that Mike would find humor. Prayed that Mike would find the humor in it like I did, you know, because it's such an asshole, weird move to put Yankee and the Braves at the end of this powerful song. where you cannot deny the sincerity of that song, and you know,
gravity,
and the gravity of that song, and then the risk being funny, because you really have to be confident that people are going to know that it's funny. You really have to be confident that you're saying, hey, we're making a fucking immediate 180 swing from the most genuine thing that you've heard us do. This one of the silliest fucking things that you've ever heard us do, and because we think that that's valuable for you to walk away maybe having laughed a little bit. Like, we beat you to fuck up, but we want you to walk out with a smile, straight up. And so that's kind of where it came from.
And now a word from our sponsors.
Back to our convo in just a second, but I wanted to give another shout out to our sponsor, ExpressVPN. Sometimes you want to watch stuff on your television that you bought and you paid for. Sometimes streaming services tell you, we don't have that, but really they do. They have it for other countries, okay? And you deserve to be able to watch whatever the hell you want to watch on your 65-inch flat screen that you bought at Best Buy in their after Christmas sale, okay? And if you want to do that, you should use ExpressVPN. Okay, the reasons to use ExpressVPN doesn't log your online activity. Most other VPNs, especially the cheap or the free ones, they sell your data to other people. So then it's people doing nefarious stuff in your info and programming weird personalized ads to you for stuff you've been looking at, like that foot cream you was talking about. That's why you see an ad for it, okay? People sell your data. ExpressVPN doesn't do that. ExpressVPN is always blazing fast, and it lets you stream the things that you should be able to watch, whatever you wanted to watch, in HD quality with zero buffering. ExpressVPN is easy to use, no technical skills needed. Just fire up the app and tap one button to connect, okay? Your auntie, your uncle, your nephew, your niece, they can use this as long as they know what a button is, okay? So protect yourself with the VPN that I use and trust. Use my link, expressvpn.com/what today, and get an extra 3 months free on a 1-year package. That's expressvpn.com/what. Visit expressvpn.com/what to learn more.
And now back to your regularly scheduled program.
Man, so this album is, like we said, it's barely a year old. I think people are still finding a lot in it. Y'all are going to get out there and tour. So it's got a whole lot of life left. So we're going to leave that where it is for now and let people continue to dig into it. As we transition out, there's one thing. You have a song on here called Never Look Back.
Never look back. Never look back. Never look back.
Which is an interesting notion considering what you and I have been doing all season. It's just looking back. And it makes me curious as we transition to some other questions, what this process has been like for you to sit and go back through your whole career.
Well, first of all, the song Never Look Back is obviously sort of an oxymoron because that's the whole song is looking back. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So it was my nod to the fact that that's my general perspective. I normally don't really look back. And as we've discussed, I think that, and as I've, since discussed with my therapist, my instincts about why I never looked back much were pretty on point, which is that it's trauma. I think that when you have trauma when you're young, you don't really form memory. I found this out. You literally don't form memories in the same way. You have a disadvantage. And to me, I always suspected as much. My personality to not really think about the past and always kind of have my eye on going forward. I always suspected that it was because I was always not happy where I was when I was younger. So the never look back shit was a nod to that. Like, hey, never look back. But the truth is I know that it's healthy. The best sort of parallel I could draw to having these conversations with you. It's not my instinct to talk too much about and go into too much detail about all of it and why I do it. But I recognize it as like, yeah, sure. Why the fuck not? It's like someone's going to probably do it. It may as well have my perspective involved. You know what I mean? Like,
100%.
But beyond that, man, listening to it, I like it. It's cool. I like our conversations. It's interesting to explain this shit to myself. Because if we weren't doing this shit, I promise you that.
Yeah, you wouldn't be sitting around thinking about half of this shit, right? Yeah.
And I think that there are people who really are just chomping at the bit to tell their story. And I totally get it. That's cool. My personality, it's kind of like, you know what? My story even with music, to some degree, is best told as the creation of the music. Mm-hmm. I can try and highlight it and give some background and give some historical information and emotional information about what went into it. But for me, to some degree, mystery always was important in art. The shit that I didn't know. There's something about knowing how, like, I'll put it, you remember when Blair Witch came out and everyone was freaked, like, everyone was like, it's crazy. Have you seen this documentary about that? Like,
so sorry, because it is my fault. Because it was my project.
When Blair Witch came out, the reason why Blair Witch, which is a shitty movie, but the reason why Blair Witch blew up was because nobody knew if it was real or not. And I knew people who saw that movie and were terrified because they thought it was real. And were telling me, like, yo, I saw this documentary, man, and it's so fucked up. I didn't see Blair Witch until well after I had looked into it. And it was, and I had read interviews and shit, and they were like, yeah, you know, we were outside the tent poking it with a stick. And I was like, oh, okay. And I guess I got to see this incredible movie, though. And then you see the movie, and it's like shot with a camcorder, and they're inside a tent, and the tent is moving. And you're like, oh, yeah, there's the guy with the stick. And, you know, and quite frankly, it didn't really do much for me. I walked away from it being like, whatever little mystery and suspension of disbelief that needed to be there in order for me to get the full effect of the art was taken away. Was taken away before you even got there. Scenario. Yeah. And I walked away from it thinking that the movie sucked. So there's always a part of me that doesn't indulge too much in explaining and over-explaining music and art. Because I do believe that art and music comes from a place that is actually not the same place that intellectualism comes from. It's more about symbolism and it's more about emotion than it is about intellectualization. So those are my reservations. That'd be my reservation traditionally of getting too intricately detailed and trying to break shit down for people. I do manage to hold back about 60% of my thoughts. So.
Well, we're getting quite a bit with that 40 then. That's tight. But people have been enjoying it, as I'm sure you've been able to see, since you've been so active and helpful in getting the word out about it. And I'm sure people are responding with how much they're enjoying it on your social media. And there's been a bunch of questions that people have wanted. Uh-oh.
Is this the AMA section of the?
Not quite, because I don't like to ask anything because I don't want to know everything. You know, it's funny. It's like the other side of the coin of what you're explaining.
Right.
Like, I want to maintain some mystery too, and I've learned that like some shit
I mean, my whole response
better just
to
not
that
to
whole
know.
phenomenon has always been like, don't ask me anything. Like, you know, ask me anything. Like, hell no. The fuck are you talking about? Like if I were to like,
like
you know,
don't ask me most
be
things.
Like,
it's a good
you walk up to a random person and be like, what size shoe is it? You know, what size shoe are you wearing? Oh, you said ask. You know, can I just ask you anything? Is that cool?
People have definitely wanted to know about a couple of projects in particular, and they were hard for me to try to talk about because they're instrumental projects, and it's hard for me to ask like contextual questions about music that doesn't have words in it. You know what I'm saying? So it's not the easiest thing to do, but since people ask me about it, I'm going to try to get into a couple of these. First is 1999's Little Johnny from the Hospital from Company Flow. So what I'm curious about listening to that album is when you were making it, since it's billed as Company Flow and you're coming out of having made that album, when you're making these beats, these fire ass beats, did you have any inclination to want to rhyme over them as you guys were making this project?
I don't know. I think not really. I think at the time, first of all, this was the first record we made after Justice had left the group. And me and Len were like, you know, we started Company Flow. We'll finish Company Flow. And we wanted to keep it going. I came up with the idea of doing an instrumental album, I think because I wanted to get some money. That was like, I was like, oh, we could probably get like 10 grand for this shit. You know what I mean? And we did. So it was just an idea of something to do that I was, you know, like, man, I want to make some shit, but I don't know really yet what the fuck is my future with rapping. It was me trying to figure out what the next Cold Flow album would be, or if I was eventually ultimately going into a solo record. I didn't know anything at the time. But it was just an idea. I think that my production and what I was doing and where I was going with it had started to become more layered and a little bit more structured. I had done some remixes and some things and some instrumental tracks for random sort of compilations and things, right? Yeah. I've done maybe like 3 or 4 instrumental tracks. So I started to really make music with structure. Whereas with Company Flow, it was just trying to make beats to rap to. And the structure would maybe be a hook or maybe be a breakdown or whatever. But for the most part, it was just trying to find a nasty beat to rap on. So I had kind of started to lend my production style to pieces that could stand on their own a little bit. But we really hadn't done it that much. And also, Len had really come into Company Flow as a full-on producer. He had contributed to the Fun Crusher Plus album. He did the little outro, the Fun Crush scratch thing. He found the record and did the loop and did a little chop for the intro to Last Good Sleep. And he also co-produced Loon TNS with Just. But I knew that he was coming into his own as a producer as well. And me and him had grown really close, and we knew that our next project was going to be us together. And so the idea of that was just to kind of us going 50-50. And we both contributed, you know, probably, I don't know, 50% of the beats to that record. There was an intersection of beats also that we worked on together. So there were at least like 4 or 5 ones on there for each of us, I think, we individually produced. And that was the record where I think it kind of prepared me for the type of production that I was doing that ultimately will go to Can I. Like that was the zone I was in. I was starting to develop, and if you listen to that record, you can hear it. I'm starting to develop that zone. Sure. It's a moodier zone, and it was different than what Company Flow sounded like. And that's what I think that was the stepping stone there. Of course, when we did the record, that was sort of also the end of our relationship with Rawkus. That's the story of that, I guess.
You talked about when you're making Run the Jewels 4 that you wanted to incorporate more samples in the Run the Jewels 4. And listening to Little Johnny from the Hospital, there's a lot of samples in that because that's a production style that you were known for at the time. As much as you can encapsulate it, what would you say your relationship to sampling has been over the course of your career?
Well, I mean, at first it was the absolute main component of the way that I made music for many years. And it started the same way that it starts with everyone, which is just literally trying to lose something. And then it developed and started into little bits of pieces and things. And then my music started to become a huge collage of a bunch of little pieces and samples and twisted pulls. But it was all a turntable and a sampler. So I would say that my sampling relationship is very intimate. That was the cornerstone of what I do. And then it changed and developed and expanded over time. And then there were records that I got almost fully away from it. But it's always a part of, it's the building blocks of the way that I learned how to make songs. Self-taught hip-hop musician, essentially. You know, I worked my way backwards from getting really good at collage stuff and creating my own creations and things that were, you know, you weren't going to drop the needle and be like, that's that song. You know, you might hear a sound though. So my relationship to sampling, by the time I got to Run the Jewels 4, I've never completely stopped sampling, but it's just a whole different production approach and technique that I developed over the years that still kept the style of, and the tones and the things in my head that were sort of what my artistic voice is, but just constantly doing different things and looking for different sources and things. What I hadn't really done even in my own career was go really intentionally, obviously sampling something. You know what I mean? Like I hadn't, like for instance, on Run the Jewels 4, Ground Below, we sampled a song that was just an first song, that was the first version of Ground Below, not to dip too far back in, but it's an explanation.
Yeah, for sure.
The Ground Below was a totally different song than the one that got released. The first version of Ground Below, we had sampled Someone Who Will Remain Nameless, and we made this song out of it, and it was incredible, and the hook was incredible, and it was a sampled hook, and it was really a full-on, like, hey, do you think we have the pull to, like, do this? Can we do a not only
high-profile artist, it sounds like y'all are saying.
I mean, not high-profile in modern times, but someone who, But like doing something as an obvious sample isn't something that I did that much, and it felt like something cool that could be done. You know, at this point in my career, it was like, you know, I spent so much time not wanting to just be someone who's just straight up pulling from records. I wanted my sound to be unique, and now enough time has gone along that if I do that, that's different for me. So I was looking for something to sample that could be identified. That could be like, oh, they flipped that. Because that's one of the cornerstones of being a producer in hip hop. Everybody knows Nautilus. Everybody knows all the classic breaks. Everyone knows a lot of things. You know, there's a bevy of things that are woven in the tradition of hip hop production that producers know. It's not about whether or not someone used the shit before. It's about how you used it. And if you can flip it in a way that no one had thought of and still make it that people understand that you're doing that, that's cool. In the producer world, there's a thrill to that. Like, yo, can I take, what is it, the Sylvesters, who I sent, Sylvesters, I believe, for Out of Sight with 2 Chainz on it, Run the Jewels for. That was another one where I was like, yo, this is the same shit the DOC used. This is the same shit that other groups have used. It's been used multiple times throughout the years. Do I have the guts and am I enough of an asshole to try and take this and make it mine?
To try to find one more way to flip this classic.
Not only classic song originally, but also classic hip hop song. One that influenced me hugely. Huge producer. Dr. Dre did that shit. Like, that's important, you know? Am I enough of a dick to do this? Can I flip this thing? And so that someone listening to it will be like, yeah, that's that. But he did it in a way that no one had done it before. He did it in a way that no one had expected. My relationship to sampling on Run the Jewels 4 was that. It was like, yo, let me bring in something, let people know that I'm clearly doing this, and be brave enough and kind of on my own dick enough to be like, but now it's mine. And so the other thing about the Ground Below is that we were on the verge of a deal with this dude to do this record. He wanted 100% of all of the publishing. No, hold up. He wanted 100% of the publishing. In other words, all the lyrics you wrote and everything over it, I still say it's my song. I don't even want to give you shit, but you can use it, but I just get all the money, all the publishing, all the mass, everything. Even still, we were like, you know what, man? Okay. Because that's the game. Because it's your shit. It's your shit. I know that I'm coming to you. I know that I'm asking you. You can just be like, no.
And they got all the leverage.
You have all the leverage, but we have leverage too. The leverage is we could either use it or not. Right. So we said, okay, 100%. All right, bet. And it kept going on, mixed the shit. But the deal wasn't done. And at the last minute, the dude decided, nah, I don't want you to use it. And that threw us for a loop. But then the Gang of Four shit came in. And I have to understand, I'm a lifelong Gang of Four fan. I have been listening to this record, Ether, forever. I had looped it up about 1 million times. I had wanted to use it in some way. I had wanted to figure out one day, I'd fantasized about using it. And then here I was again, and I was being confronted with like this jam that really rounded the album out, being gone, and maybe us missing our street date and shit, you know. And that could have been a disaster, and it could have been, fuck it, the song's not on there. And then, you know, the skies parted and opened up, and I remembered that I love this group and that this song is something that this might be the perfect place for me to finally use this thing that I've loved since I was a kid.
RTJ, the God killer, this Tokyo and I'm Godzilla. Playing blackjack versus death, gun on the car dealer. Just bought a demon, I'm screaming about the car dealer. Last temptation of Mike, but I'm a God ticker.
And it worked out even better, and it was even doper, and it was exactly what needed to happen for the song. And all of that stress and everything was what needed to happen because we needed to come to that song. The only reason I'm even going on about this is because just to point out that the sampling that I'm doing is like directly connected to my life and my inspiration and my lineage as a musician and the shit that thrilled me.
Shit that you fuck with, yeah.
Right, and that's what Run the Jewels 4 was about, was really bringing and embracing in all of the things in a pure way, everything that we love about musically as well as lyrically and everything that we were bringing into the lineage of what we were doing in the record. And so that's a different place to be in terms of looking at sampling and where I was when I first started, and where I was with Company Flow and Little Johnny from the Hospital, and Cannibal Ox, and all the records up until Cancer for Cure. I don't know, where it was like, no, this is my main way that I make music, and I'm trying to construct things that if I'm doing my job right, no one will know where the fucking sample is and where it isn't. So that's kind of my relationship with it. I don't make music like right now. I'm making a record where there are no samples. And this is not a Run the Jewels record. I'm just doing a thing. I'm using all analog drum machines and all analog synths and all analog and kits and music and instruments. It's only just because it's all just a rotating bag of tools and tricks for me in terms of keeping myself excited about music. Sound is sound for me. That's it. Like sound is sound for me. I don't have any specific, apart from that sentiment that I'm talking about, which is giving something to people as a sample that where you're saying, raising your hand and being like, hey, look at me, I'm sampled.
Right.
That I recently have found really interesting. One day, I swear to God, I'm just going to make a whole rap record on an Sonic EP at 16 plus again. Like that's going to happen, at some point, just on some fuck it shit, because I spent so many years with this machine and it taught me how to make music. And it was such an art form and so fun to really dig in and pull sound and make collage art and all that shit. And I loved it. It's a huge part of me. So I'll do that one day.
Hey, first of all, I just want to say that was an amazing fucking story. And I want to take a sec just to thank you for so many amazing fucking stories throughout the time that we've been talking. Stuff that might not seem like the most interesting thing to you as it's coming out of your mouth has given so much insight into this music. And I think, we exist in a genre where we typically don't get a chance to add a lot of context. So I just wanted to say how much I appreciate shit like that.
Cool. Well, I mean, and since this is the last one, thank you for being a great conversation. And people are recognizing that. You got to know, people really see that you're really good at talking about music with people, and thank you for having clearly listened and knowing and having a genuine interest, because I don't think this conversation would have probably gone on for 12 episodes if it was
if I wasn't.
So tell me about,
if I wasn't into it.
Tell me about rap.
I appreciate that. Speaking of analog music, real quick, I want to touch on 2004's High Water.
Analog like a motherfucker, yeah.
Exactly, as analog as it gets. First of all, who is the Blue Series Continuum? Because I hadn't heard of them before.
They were a group of there's Matthew Shipp, who is the main sort of guy, was a famous jazz piano player. William Parker, who was a famous bassist. And I'm stoned, so I'm not going to try and rattle off everybody's name. But it was a group of musicians who were putting jazz records out. They created this thing, Blue Continuum series. It wasn't like they were a band. It was like they started doing these projects that they held by Matthew Shipp. His perspective was that jazz needed to not just stay in its own lane. Jazz needed to commingle with other types of musicians and other types of music thinkers, and creators. So they started doing collaborations with different types of producers, some from the hip hop world. They did one with Anti-Pop Consortium. They did one with me. So basically it was just them trying to throw themselves into the hands of someone else and see what the result. Because just like any other form of music, especially something like jazz, now this is free jazz too. Like all of these musicians were essentially anarchists. They were all classically trained up to a certain point, but then they were too goddamn ill to even bother with that. They were trying to get to the purest form of what the music was. It was a movement, and it was something that produced a lot of amazing music in the past. And like anything that starts without rules, it started to, I think you could say, not as a criticism, but as an observation, that if you have the same non-rules for 50 years, then they become rules, That was my perspective on it. It was like, what do you do with people who aren't reading off music, don't know where the song is going to end, but at the same time, they're all sitting in a room and they're all playing, they're all sort of freestyling, as we would call it, all this music. And then they're really in tune with each other and they're watching each other and they crescendo. And they all of a sudden, you're in the room with all these dudes and they're all standing up at the same time. Like no one said anything. No one, there was nothing on a piece of paper that said this is when we crescendo. And all of a sudden they're all standing up and they're crescendoing and then they're breaking down. They've played with each other and they've played with this type of structure of music so much that even in the type of music where there are no rules, there is a sort of unspoken structure to the shit that's all based on their experience and their vibe from what they've done before. So I was asked to come in and produce it, and of course I was terrified. I took mad long to think about. I took mad long to think about it, and I was like, I don't know. Let me think about it. And a week went by, and I was like, all right, well, let's get up the bravery to do this. And I was like, all right, I've decided I'll do it. I'll do the song. And they were like, no, album. I was like, literally thought they were asking me to do a song, and I was scared to do that at the time. They were like, nah, actually, we meant will you do the whole album? And I was like, oh, fuck. And so like anything, I had to think about what my approach might be or what my values of that situation might be, because I really am just a self-taught bedroom beat making musician motherfucker. And that's where I was. And I had gotten pretty far in my own experience with that. But getting in a room with people and being the driving force behind it, but not being the main artist behind it, wasn't something I was particularly used to, and especially working with those types of musicians. So I had to think about what it was that I might be able to contribute to that, and that also might be able to bring into my own world and make it work for me. And what I settled on was two things. A, I would bring some music in. I would create some shit and that had vibe and tone and direction, and I would bring that in, and they would play to that. They would freestyle to that. So at least I knew that whatever I got, it was in the tone of something that it was in the key and in the structure to some degree of what I already knew I liked and with an idea that I was pursuing as a beat. Right. The second thing that I did was much to their at first chagrin, but then ultimately their acquiescence, was that I brought in sheet music.
Really?
Yep. So I hit my dad up, who's a jazz pianist and singer, who I had never done anything. I'd never worked with, never done anything. He kind of retired from music, and I asked him, I kind of tricked him. I said, because also I kind of looked at it like maybe an opportunity to fit my father into this situation.
Interesting.
So I hit him up and I was like, hey, Dad, I'm doing this record and I want to have these guys basically cover some standards. I want to hear what their version of a standard would be. Because I knew that they were essentially, like I said, anarchists. When it came to, they didn't fucking look at sheet music. When I presented them with sheet music that my father had picked, he had given me 3 or 4 choices that he sang. So he sat at the piano and he sang them for me. He sent me what they were, and I got the sheet music. And I ended up picking this one. Long story short, I took some of the songs that he had picked, and I got the sheet music and I brought it in, and I handed it out. And they were kind of like, what the fuck? Yo, man, I haven't read sheet music since I was, 30. And these dudes are 60, 70, some of them. There was a little grumbling, but they were game. They were like, all right, well, fuck it. And so that was the other component of it. So I had them riffing on things, because I was like, man, that's like probably the only thing I can provide you is like the one rule that you have, like the thing where you're the most free. Like maybe I can take that away from you, and it'll jostle this thing into a different result.
Wow.
Not that your results that you gotten before were bad, but we're looking for a new result here, right? And so those are the two elements that I had. I had them improvising to things that I had created at home, and I had them playing different standards and things in their way that had already been established, and then I would take those in and turn them into turn them into structured songs. So it was this really weird back and forth process of me like just trying to figure out why the fuck am I here? Like what can I do? And that was what I could do, and my father ended up singing this like tragic, I don't know if he knew he was doing this shit or if he was trying to send me a really heavy-handed message, but it was, you hearing your father sing this song called Yesterday when the moon was blue or whatever.
When the moon was blue, yeah, yesterday. When the moon was blue.
And he's just like this lament about all the mistakes he's made in his past and the people he's been, an asshole to, and he's loved, and now he's at the end of his life and he's alone. And I'm listening to this fucking song and my father singing this shit. And I'm just like, come on, man. Like this is, this is low hanging fruit. Like, just say it to me, dude. Like, you know, like you don't have to sing it to me. Like, shit. You know, and it was really powerful. It was really powerful to hear my dad say this, because my dad, I get the feeling, does have a lot of regret. As I'm sure anybody with a bunch of empathy and a bunch of self-reflection when they get to their later years, anyone who's worth a damn probably wishes they could have changed some of the ways that they acted in the past. So that's how I took it. I don't take it like, oh, you lived a tragic life, but it was this really powerful jam. And that became one of the centerpieces of, and it was a standard. It was something that was, you know, but here's my father choosing it. He could have chosen anything. Wow. It was like a Rorschach test, you know, like, choose some songs, Dad. And he was like, here's one about my tragic regret, you know, and you're just like, oh shit, you know. And, but, you know, so he's on the record, and that was a big sort of one of the reasons why I did the record in the first place, because I had a suspicion and a plan to rope my dad into it. So I could at least say before my recording career is over that I did something with my father.
That's awesome. And I'm glad we did touch on that album, just if alone for the fact that, you know, we got to rope a story about your dad into the pod, because we hadn't done that at all. And telling your story. So yeah, we're telling your story, and this is a hip hop story. And I've been adamant about trying to keep it all positive, because I like to celebrate the people that we have on this program. But it's a hip hop story, and sometimes beef is a part of hip hop. And what I'm not necessarily interested in is focusing on specific genres and naming names and shit like that. But what I am interested in is where you sit right now when you reflect on the beefs you had, because you went at some people legendarily on Wax. Like it, you know, like it was not, you know, shit was not left up to detective work to figure out, you know, who you was going at. And I wonder, when you reflect back on that stuff, and since that's not something you do often, like what do you think about that? What do you think about battles on Wax in your career?
In my career,
yeah.
I don't know, man. Shit. I mean, you know, I'm still a rapper, dude.
I know it. I
don't
know
what
it.
To tell you, like,
that's real.
That being said, you know, I'm not on it. Like, I don't have that type of shit pop up anymore. But, you know, at a certain point in my life, if you came at me, I was more than willing to hand you back a hot coal to put in your palm. And that's basically it. I mean, come on, man. We all fucking grow up, and none of it is that serious. And it's like,
that's kind of what I kind of want to get at too. I also wonder, and this may or may not have happened, if you ever like got cool with any people you used to beef with. That's good.
I don't have any lingering beefs in my life. I just I do not participate in that. I don't do it in my personal life either. There's very few people in my life that I've ever had to completely walk away from, and there have been a few. But the fact of the matter is, yeah, man, come on, I'm not on it like that. I genuinely don't like discord at this point in my life, and but just on some rap shit though.
On some MC
shit,
if
you catch me at 25 and you say, you know what I mean, like, you know, it is what it is, man. I mean, shit. This is still rap music. I mean, I came up
still a sport
as a battle rapper, straight up. And again, not in a competitive battle rap scene. That was the angle that I came at as an MC. And just like, you know, I'm on some rap shit. Like I'm destroying my invisible rap enemies. You know what I mean? Like, you know, that's all. It's when you're young and you start rapping, that's kind of what it is. You know, you got invisible enemies in your head, and you're coming up with the most creative ways to destroy them. And then 100%. Sometimes it's people.
Sometimes it's visible people.
Sometimes they really do exist. And then, you know, if that's the case, you know, you have a choice. You know, and just like anybody has a choice to say some shit, then there might be a result. I don't know. I mean, honestly, man, there's nothing deep about it at this point. Yeah, I've made a couple of diss records to a couple of cats that I thought dissed me. They had dissed me, you know? So I was just like, all right, here you go. This is the result of that.
Yeah, you wasn't out there unsolicited shitting on people. It was real battles back at the time. Like it was happening.
Yeah, but again, you know, end of the day, I'm so far removed from those things. I totally have no issue with anybody, you know? It's all good.
That's great. That's great to hear. And I thought that, but that's also just great to hear. But anyway, let that be that. 3 rapid fire questions, as rapid as you can answer, as we prepare to wrap this whole thing up. All under the category of what's next for you. One, any inclination to do more solo rap stuff at the moment?
At the moment?
Yeah.
That's not what I'm working on at the moment. I know that that's come up a few times in our interview and in our interviews, and I'm totally open to whatever, honestly.
Word.
That might happen at some point. All I've ever maintained is that I don't know.
Which is the truth.
Which is the truth. Which is the total truth. Right now, I'm not working on a solo album. Yeah.
Word. Second question. Any dream collab you want to put out into the universe right now? Something that's outside of your reach that you're just going to fucking wish into existence.
Oh, God damn you.
Yeah.
Give me a second. Fuck. Who do I want? Who's a dream collab? I don't know, man. I mean, a lot of the dream collabs have passed away in the last 5 years.
That's real. That's
straight
100%
up
true.
Two
from Bowie, probably.
I mean, Prince and Bowie, and same year, George Michael.
Right.
That was like, Jesus is getting a house band together or some shit. Like, God damn, motherfucker must be having a party.
But that's real too. I think that's as valid of an answer as any, considering how vast your actual musical network is. Like, I think, to try to put something in the category of dream, it's only fair that you include people who are now no longer with us.
For sure. And I'm open to collaboration in general, especially with people that I admire. Sometimes I have a wish list, and sometimes I just can't think of it. Because I think my whole approach to collaboration, even on these records, has always been: there's a song, and it needs an energy. It needs something. It's not that there's a person, and that person needs that person needs a song. Not every person that you admire is someone that you really need to insert yourself into their musical legacy.
True. It don't always make sense.
But also it's not always, it's just, to me, it's not the purest way into the thought. To me, the purest way into the thought is being inspired, and then you can't help but hear someone on the shit. And then that's when you start engaging in your dreaming, because you have a category of types of people who you want to hear on something. And who would I get if I could get anyone who's around still? Okay, how about this? We definitely tried to get Elton John on Run the Jewels 4. And we almost did. Elton John was down. We had a hook that I had written, and it was for Goonies versus E.T. And originally that beat was totally different. It was a whole string thing. You'll hear in the hook that my voice is chopped and screwed. It's like it's slowed down. But originally I was just singing it as a demo. We were trying to get it to Elton John. I had gone through a few people to get it to him. Elton John is a Run the Jewels fan. He's made that clear. That's awesome. He was like, he was on tour. And he was like, I'll be here on this date and here on this date. And it just ended up not being possible. So I would definitely like to fulfill that at some point. Yeah, I'll throw that out there. Yeah. What up, Al?
That's real.
Get at me, Elton.
Wonderful. Anything else you just want to fucking say to people on the way out?
Again, thank you, man. Seriously, thank you. It's been a great conversation, and I hope it wasn't too fucking mind-numbingly wordy.
Well, I'm a fan, man, and to me, it's been a privilege just to be able to pick your brain about this stuff this music that I've loved. You know what I'm saying? So it's really been a privilege to me. But I wanted to make sure to say this: you're a free man.
But I don't want my freedom anymore. It's the Helsinki effect.
It worked.
I'm gonna hit you up at like 4 a.m. and be like, "Yo, I had some thoughts about little Johnny from the hospital, man. Can we just talk? Can we talk a little bit?"
Well, I'll fire up the old
Congratulations
PC for you anytime, man.
Being the emotional receptacle for years and years of pent up stories. All right, brother. Hey, be good, Mike. I appreciate you.
You too.
Stony Island Audio.